right. Dear delegates, hardworking staff members, esteemed student officers, MUN directors, fellow guests, arbitrary others, and of course, our dearest CIMUN team of 2021. My name is Bella Bittner, and it is my great honor to speak at the closing ceremony of the 4th annual and second virtual Copenhagen International Model United Nations in 2021. I had the undeniable pleasure and opportunity to serve as the Secretary General of CIMUN 2020, the conference previous to this, where I had the actual non-sarcastic pleasure to serve with a number of the individuals that have put on this conference, including the esteemed Secretary General herself. I'd like to start off by simply thanking and acknowledging the fantastic job the CIMUN team has done this year in putting on this conference, despite the certainly challenging circumstances. I can say from experience that having to put on a virtual Model United Nations conference can be demoralizing, particularly when you had to do it due to an unexpectedly slow recovery from this brutal pandemic. And this team certainly had their work cut out for them to resolve the technical difficulties that we experienced last year. So I'd just like to thank them for doing such a fantastic job this year and for all the hard, long work they put into it, despite pressing school deadlines and of course, COVID-19. Thank you. I've been asked to speak today about the conference theme, justice through our past, present, and future, drawing off my experience as a former Secretary General and from my experiences since graduating from Copenhagen International School. The conference theme of the last assignment was ethics and morals. In a way, that conference theme was very similar indeed to this year's, with, however, some important differences. To compare these two themes, I'll share an excerpt of my pre-conference speech in CIMUN 2020, where I said, quote, ethics and morals are, in essence, what dictates what is right or wrong from a standpoint of society, ethics, and oneself, morals. Around the world, and even from person to person in the same country, town, or household, interpretations and beliefs regarding ethics and morals vary incredibly, which makes what is right or wrong incredibly difficult to define from an objective standpoint. It is this subjectivity that makes international politics what it is, and is a huge part of what MUN is about. Understanding that ethics and morals are considered to be different by different people, and working to overcome these differences to strive for a better world. From former Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2005 to current Secretary General Antonio Guterres this year, it has been stated again and again that a moral imperative or moral obligation exists when addressing conflict, especially in regards to preventing suffering, in the words of Kofi Annan. Therefore, what these participants should consider during and after this conference is, what is the moral imperative? What is the obligation of each international governmental organization, each government, and each individual in securing a better future and fighting for it, end quote. Conversely, here's an extract of the current Secretary General's pre-conference website published speech, describing the conference theme of justice in our past, present, and future. Or is it our idea of justice that exists in some type of way, the burning desire to create equality? Looking at our justice in our past, present, and future is perhaps the only effective way to understand ourselves, our true human nature. Because we always searched for it in the past, we are still looking for it now, and we'll fight for it in the future. The concept of it has never changed. However, there are different means and different scenarios in which justice is sought, which are the foundations of the topics of our conference, end quote. Justice can be subject to many different definitions, depending on what you think is just. But the core definition, which I'll recognize here, is that justice is behavior or treatment based on what is morally or ethically right and fair. So what is the difference between the two topics? Well, the beauty of this current conference theme is that it brings the 2020 topic, ethics and morals, into a three-pronged approach. What happened in the past, what's happening now, and what we can do now to change what will happen in the future. Justice is subjective, but because it is based on ethics and morals. But this three-pronged approach lets us think more concretely about these issues, with the end goal of resolving injustices that exist around the world. So let's think about what these injustices have been, are, and will be. What can be done to right these wrongs? What can be done to make sure that they never happen again? It's not hard to think of injustices in the past or present. Oppression, sexism, classism, religious persecution, slavery. But what can we do about that? What can we do to rectify those situations and right those wrongs? We've certainly made a lot of progress on some of these. There still exists much work to be done. We've illegalized slavery here in the United States, but injustices resulting from it still exist. Glorification of those injustices still exist. If I'd been here in Richmond, Virginia, just 2 years ago, I would have seen half a dozen Confederate statues on my way from my dorm to the convenience store. Instead, the first time I set foot in Richmond, I drove past empty pedestal after empty pedestal, Confederate monuments toppled, except one. That was just 1 month ago, when I moved into my college dorm and drove past the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, graffitied from this summer's Black Lives Matter protests, hiding behind a metal fence which surrounded the statue. Well, we've made more progress because that statue is no longer there. It was taken down 2 weeks ago when the city of Richmond won a lawsuit, bringing down that last public Confederate statue in the former capital of the Confederacy. And that happened because people saw an injustice, decided they wanted to right that wrong, and went and did something about it. But we are just a bunch of students doing a mock world government. What do any of us have to do with the real, concrete, effectual problems that pervade the world outside of these walls once you click the little red X in the corner of your Google Chrome window? One of the things that you will find in any of my successful share applications is this: that in all cases, what you learn and do inside the committee should be brought subsequently outside of that committee and into the real world. That while during these past 3 days and during other conferences, you represent and fight for the views of a country, views you may agree with, but more often and more likely views you disagree with, or in some cases find detestable. While during these days, you represent a voice that is not your own, when you step outside of that committee, you take that same confidence, clarity, and conviction to fight for the view with which you fought for the views of a country, and to use that to fight for your own views and for what you consider to be justice. Injustices have existed throughout our past and exist in the present and will exist in the future because of people who do not speak out. Because the lies, the deception, and the fear-mongering finds itself without sufficient opposition in achieving its injustices. You have just one voice, but if you stand up and fight for not only yourself, but for others as well, others will follow. You are one of a million voices, but it is not a million voices without you. So think back upon what you've done during these past 3 days. What have you done? Looking through the topics that you've been discussing, I think a more relevant question might be, what haven't you done? I see resolution to problems that scourge all corners of society today, from authoritarian stamping on the personal liberties outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, such as the freedom of expression and the freedom to practice religion, to protecting marginalized communities, such as indigenous communities, which I know here in the United States have been subject to particular persecution, and protecting those dependent on jobs which are rapidly disappearing due to cost-saving automation. These are all issues that you have discussed. These are all issues that you have come up with solutions to. Are your solutions realistic? In most cases, probably not. But that's not what's important. What's important is that you thought about these issues, you decided that they needed to be solved, and you went and put your minds to it. Inside the committee, you have the power to affect the role-play world there. But outside of the committee, you have just as much power to change the real world. This isn't something you have to wait on until you're all grown up. This is the power that you have right now. This is the power that Greta Thunberg had striking from school to protest for the future of this planet and for our future, even before she was invited to speak at the United Nations. This is the power that youth had when they went to protest the murder of George Floyd at the hands of law enforcement last summer. This is the power that youth like yourselves have seized, and this is the power that you too possess. So use it. Protest, speak, demand that changes be made. That is the power that you possess today, and it is a power that cannot be ignored. People will listen. Even if they try not to, you have the power to make them. They will listen. If we want to have a more just future, we need to use the power that we have today. We need to say to those who have had their chance that they've had it, and that if there's someone who's going to change our future for the better, that's going to be us. Not some old white guy putting his reparations or climate mitigation standards or whatever the case may be, It will be us. We are the future. And if that's going to be a just future, we need to have these discussions about what justice is today, looking back at the injustices of the past to pave the way for our own just future. With that, I'd like to thank the Secretariat and the CIMUN team as a whole for putting on this fantastic conference and wish you all the best. Madam Secretary General, I yield the floor.